Welcome to What is Going Ohms, Transforming Your Destiny by Decoding Your Emotional DNA, in which hosts Sandie Sedgbeer and Judy Wilkins-Smith help you unravel and reframe the unconscious ancestral patterns that may be secretly limiting your success in life, love, finance, and career.
Hello, and welcome to the final episode in this transformative web series in which family patterns expert, trainer, systemic coach, and founder of System Dynamics for organizations and individuals, Judy Wilkins-Smith, has been revealing the truth behind the secret insecurities, beliefs, emotions, and invisible patterns that drive our behavior in all of our relationships with money, in love, at work, and in our careers. In showing us how these patterns play out in different areas of our lives, Judy has demonstrated that many of the recurring problems and difficulties we experience didn't originate with us. Now, in this final episode, we're going to pull together everything we've learned and unravel those generational patterns with some easy, practical, step-by-step instructions to help us decode our DNA, break those limiting cycles, shift the hidden thoughts and feelings that run our life, and uncover the buried treasure that can transform all our failures into success. And you may want to make notes of the steps that Judy is going to take us through. So if you're listening at home, now might be a good time to run and get some pen and paper. And if that's not possible right now, then I guarantee you'll want to come back to this episode, listen to it again, when you can actually follow Judy's instructions and do the process for yourself. So, Judy Wilkins-Smith, welcome back.
Hi, Sandie. It's lovely to be with you. Cold, but lovely.
Yes, it's cold at this end too. And yes, we're coming to the end of this really brilliant series. And this is where we get to put it all together. Before we start, I want to ask you something. If you had to open up this episode by asking our listeners one question, what would it be?
That's probably a very easy one for me. The same question that I ask on my website. How big are you willing to be? It's a very important question, because the how big you're willing to be, and that is different things for different people, is what kicks you into gear and takes you out of the complacency or the place of stuckness. The moment that you declare yourself willing to be the biggest version of yourself, the adventure begins. And that's when you get to have a look at the family patterns, have a look at what's going on around you, and instead of those being something that limits you, you get to turn those into strengths that will catapult you forward. So now your family system and its apparent limitations turn into what they were always meant to be, the galvanizer for the next chapter that only you can write.
Right. So this is the thing, isn't it? Because so many people think they want to be bigger than they are, but when it comes down to it, they're actually scared of being bigger.
They are. People will often say they're scared of failure. But as Maya Angelou has said, you're actually, to paraphrase, you're more afraid of who you could be. And I think some of that comes down to you're afraid that if I really am bigger, I may lose the people I love, which is a common systemic myth, I think. Because what you're actually doing is you're expanding the system so that more people can have more possibilities. So in the truest sense of the word, if you want to change the world, you'll be changing it beginning with you, and it's not just a cliche. This is the actual step that begins to change you, your community, your family, and of course then the world.
So, over the last 6 months, anybody who's been listening who says, well, I don't have a problem with money, I don't have a problem at work, I don't have a problem in my relationships, but may have a problem with being willing to be bigger than they are, this is going to work for them regardless.
Absolutely. You may not have a problem, and that's great, because if you don't have a problem, you have a responsibility. It's like the whole systemic piece of, it's not my fault that I failed. It lives in the family. Well, it may not be your fault, but it is absolutely your responsibility to change that. And Sandie, if we would all just have a look at how big am I willing to be and start taking the steps, you would see a very different world within a matter of 12 months. The kindness comes back in, the gratitude, the willingness, the enthusiasm, the plugging in, the engagement comes in. And when that happens, our inevitable future is no longer that. Now it's a big question mark. Now we're living in possibility, not in stuckness. And this is super important.
Yeah. So, okay, this is about pulling it all together. You know, we've gone through many of the different areas of life, not all of them. And I think all of us can recognise somewhere within one of those arenas, if not more, you know, where we are a bit stuck and where we keep repeating the same patterns. So where do we begin? Tell us about your process.
So let's look at two things. You said a bit stuck, and earlier on we spoke about what if you're not. So my comment there simply would be you're either a bit stuck or you're heading towards the next step up. And for that, this will do for both frames of mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through what we would typically look at during a session. So you the individual listener. And what I want you to do is listen, feel, notice. Because the body isn't just the mind and it isn't just the heart. It's also not just the gut. It's all three in cohesion. When those three align, you'll notice that you start to move things forward quite quickly. So what we're going to do is I want you, the listener, to take this as your own personal home session. Typically, I would do this over a couple of hours, but we're going to narrow it down, and you get to fill in the bits for you. So
can I just add before you start that our listeners are actually getting a really valuable gift here for nothing.
Yes, they are. Typically, this would be a rather extensive 2-hour session. And so today, what we are doing is we're giving that to them for free. This would typically cost you about $500 to $600. So you're getting a nice chunk of session here. And the invitation is to maximize those $500 or $600. Invest in it. Invest in yourself. This is one of those days where you get to do that, and it's a gift from the universe, if you like. But specifically a gift from Sandie and I to you. And so what I want you to do is we're going to break it into 2 parts. The first thing that I want you to do is, and bear in mind, tell yourself first, this is simple. It's not rocket science. You're going to take an issue that's important for you. And I want you to write down 3 thoughts you have about that issue. Just thoughts that pop up. I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I can't do what I want to do. 3 thoughts. And then I want you to write down 3 feelings that you have about it. Now, actually, in the thoughts, I named feelings. So let's just say the thoughts are, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling stuck. I don't know if I'll ever move. The 3 feelings would perhaps be I'm angry, I'm sad, frustrated, depressed. And I want you to just notice those and let them kind of sit in your body so you can feel them. We're pretty quickly able to engage with those feelings once we've written down the thoughts and feelings. Then I want you to write down what you make this issue, the feelings, the thoughts, what do you make it mean about you or about others? So what do you make it mean about you? I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. I'll never be able to do it. I'm not smart enough. What do you make it mean about others? They always betray me. People aren't trustworthy. People aren't kind. there are your pieces for what you make it mean about you and others. The next thing I want you to write down is 3 actions that you do or don't take when this issue surfaces. So let's take relationships. 3 actions I don't take. I don't engage. I don't talk about it. I don't get myself out of bed in the morning and go and look for a different relationship. 3 things I do. I withdraw. I get angry and frustrated. I blame. So there are your 3 actions. So now we've got just the first part. So it's your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, what you make it mean about yourself, what you make it mean about others. Now, in just that little bit, you're going to get a sense of how this issue has you stuck and how it's limiting your full-on good and bigness in life. So the next part of that we're going to look at, Sandie, you still with me? Do you need to...
I'm still with you. I'm here all the way. I'm working on my issues, Judy.
Good. So the next thing you're going to ask yourself is, when did this begin for me? Very important. Some people will tell me it's been around for as long as I can remember. Now, that may be pre-verbal, or it may mean that traveled down with you from prior generations. It's kind of embedded in there. So when did this begin for me? Or you may notice that it began with one particular event. That sets the whole thing off. Now, this is very important because with this particular event, what I would ask you to do later is to go back and have a look at the thoughts, feelings, and actions you had at the time. Because we might want to revisit those to see, is this still true for me, or am I simply holding it as the truth or unmovable? Bearing in mind that values, thoughts, feelings, and actions are like us. They grow up, and they're allowed to change. So, when did this begin for me? Has this happened to me more than once? In other words, am I creating a pattern here? Has anyone in the family had a similar pattern? Now, it may not be identical, but if you look at it, it may simply have the same flavor. We all fail. We all fail at the point of success. We all lose the men in the family. We all lose the women in the family. Similar patterns. That whole idea of sounds like, feels like, thinks like. And then the next thing is, in that case, this issue that I have, very important question, does it actually belong to me, or am I holding it for somebody else? Now, I will tell you that that question has a lot of people's eyebrows raised because they're going, well, I'm feeling it. Yes, you're feeling it. But you're also very prone to feeling multi-generational patterns and thoughts and feelings and actions. We do that. It's actually in some ways how the world grows. We follow these patterns. And it's also some ways in which the world is stuck. So, does this belong to me, or does it belong to someone else? So now we've got 2 parts. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, does it matter if you really can't work out the answer to that one?
It doesn't, because you will at some point. It's going to keep, once you've asked yourself that question, it will keep popping up for you. And at some point, you'll actually recognize, oh my goodness, my mother does that. And you may realize that you're doing it because, so that my poor mom doesn't suffer alone, me too. So that dad doesn't struggle with his stuff, I will also. Quite unconscious, but there it is. And if you can't work it out, simply look at where did it begin for you, and does it still belong to me, or is it time to set it down? Yeah?
Okay. Yep.
So then you ask yourself, what is the pattern that needs to stop? In other words, if we look at the issue, I can never make relationships work. Okay, So what is your pattern in relationships that needs to stop? What do you not want anymore? Well, I always withdraw super quickly, and I'm offended and quickly because I just know where this is going, and so I'm done. Is that still serving you, or is it time for that to stop? Now, quite often, that pattern is tied to multi-generational patterns or an event of your own, one or the other. And if you can look at either of those, you can begin to see how they tie together. When you've got that piece, what needs to stop? What is the pattern that needs to stop? You don't have to ask the how. In fact, you will hear from most teachers in different disciplines, it's not the how. For now, it's the what. So, what pattern needs to stop? I'll give you the how in a minute, actually. It's pretty simple. What pattern needs to stop? What do you not want anymore? It's just done. When you get that, you'll actually probably feel that quite deeply, either in your throat, your solar plexus, your gut. You're very likely to feel it because it's got you. Then you want to ask yourself, okay, deep breath and breathe it out. Got that piece. Now, what do I really, really want? If I were to put that pattern down and look at what I really want instead, what is that? Now, bear in mind, Sandie, that a lot of people struggle with this because they know very quickly what they don't want. But we've been conditioned a lot to think about what we don't want and our limitations. We're not as well prepped to think about what do I want and my possibilities. Because we're forever trying to fix what's wrong with us instead of building on what's right with us. So if I could get listeners to tweak one piece, it would be, there is plenty right with you. We are simply adding building blocks. Now, if you could add a building block, what do you really, really want that's different? Because that is the pattern that's trying to emerge through you. That's part of how big are you willing to be. It's trying very hard to get your attention. And it's asking you to switch your focus from what's wrong to what's right, from what's limiting to what's possible. It is the way out of where you're stuck. It's the enticer, it's the future, it's the path forward. I said to you, I would tell you the how. And often we don't have the how. In the how, you want to ask yourself, what one new thought can I think here? What is a different possibility? My mother didn't love me. My mother was too busy to see me. My mother's mother didn't see her. Children aren't always seen by their mothers. I could be seen by my mother, or I could see my mother. Do you notice how we've just gone through the iteration of a new thought? Oh my goodness, if I can look at my mother and understand why she can't see me, my heart is a little softer. I don't feel like it's all about me. I don't feel blamed and wrong anymore. I may feel sad, but I don't feel wrong. I'm not stuck. I wonder what might happen if I looked at my daughter or the community around me in ways that Mom couldn't. So for Mom who couldn't, what might it be like if I did? If I did it differently? If I could be engaged? Hold on a minute. Now I have one new feeling happening here. This is a little bit exciting. I'm not stuck. I have a possibility here. I could be the one who makes the difference. And then, what one new action could you take that would start you investing in the direction of what you really want? It doesn't have to be big steps. We always say, or I always say, transformation happens in a moment. Now, a lot of people disagree with me and they say it takes years. No, it doesn't. Transformation happens the minute you have that new thought, new feeling. It's possible. I feel differently. Now you're on a very different path. It may take you a while to fill the steps in, but the change has happened. And if you invest in that change and you keep focusing on that change, you're going to build a very different path. And if you invest in it really, really hard, you're going to move in that direction. So now you're going to take different actions. Instead of withdrawing, going home, having a cup of tea sadly in front of the television because I'm feeling sad again, I may go home and go, I made a change in my thoughts. I feel very differently. This may be a champagne day for me. I don't know what I'm celebrating yet, but I know I feel different. I know I'm thinking differently. And today, instead of me running away, I stood still for a moment. And I didn't die. So how's that for a first step?
Yeah, that works for me.
Perfect. So now we've got your framework, and this is why I say to people so often, this work is a complex body of matter or a complex subject. It is equally simple. Once you get the hang of it, you will begin to teach yourself the language of you, the language of your system. You're going to begin to learn to fall in love with your system because it was always designed to be of service to you. So I really want you and your listeners just to take a nice deep breath and go, okay, we got it. We got the first piece. And as my friend Barry would say, exhale, or as so many would say, exhale. I tend to tell people to take a deep breath and move on, and then they tell me I was purple in the face by the time I figured I should exhale. So that's our first piece. When you've written those down, and guys, you can do this with anything that you're working with, anything. You're going to teach yourself to notice all of those unconscious thoughts, feelings, and actions that trip you up and don't always serve you, and then become conscious of mindfully laying them down in ways that become your galvanizer, your motivator, your animator, your movement. So that's our first piece, and this is something that you're probably fairly used to doing, thinking about it, maybe even writing about it. But in the next piece that we're going to do, we're going to take you out of just engaging the brain and just engaging the thinking piece. Sandie, are we good with that?
Yep. How are we going to do that?
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to engage some senses other than your brain. And I don't know if you want to take a break here quickly and we come back into that, or if you want me to go straight in. I'm easy either way.
Let's take a break now because I really don't want to interrupt the process once you've started on that. Okay, so we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and you're listening to the final episode of a 6-month web series in which family patterns expert, systemic coach, trainer, and motivational speaker Judy Wilkins-Smith has been demonstrating how we can transform our destiny by decoding our emotional DNA. We'll be back with more from Judy after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Mental health. Most people think it means mental illness. Most people are wrong. Mental health doesn't apply to just some of us. It applies to everyone. We're all susceptible to anxiety and depression. They're human conditions. And no person should ever feel embarrassed, ashamed, or be discriminated against for being human. Cracked the podcast strips away the shame, fear, and stigma by expanding the conversation into areas less often visited. From brain and body chemistry, hormones, food, nutrition, trauma, and the microbiome, to pharmaceutical drugs, psychedelic substances, meditation, visionary experiences, and spiritual awakenings. Cracked the podcast will explore them all, including the notion that, for many, breakdown can be the beginning of breakthrough. For in the words of singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in. Cracked the podcast, slaying the dragons of mental health. Join co-hosts Sandie Sedgbeer and Rebecca Shaper on the first and third Thursday of every month at 12 noon Eastern Time.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back. Before we continue with the next part of Judy's process, I just want to give you a heads up on a powerful book that could be of enormous help if you're feeling stuck in a rut and want your life to move forward but don't know how to create new opportunities. It's called The Necktie and the Jaguar, and it's by Carl Greer. In addition to being a fascinating memoir, it contains some valuable keys that can put you effortlessly on the path to transformation. If you want to know more about that book, go over to carlgreer.com and check it out. That's CarlGreer.com. And now, back to our final, putting it all together, episode of Decoding and Transforming Your Emotional DNA with Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, let's move on to the next part. I've got my issue written down in front of me, and I sure would like to get rid of it.
Great. So what you're going to do is you had a look at it with thoughts, feelings, actions, wrote those all down, and what we're going to do now is we're going to get you to play with that in us. We're going to engage your senses, as I said before, other than your brain. So we're going to use your head, your heart, and your gut. Now, the heart, head, gut is also known as your second brain system, and it's valuable. When your heart opens, let me first begin by saying people often say we're closed-minded or open-minded. It's not. It's either we're closed-hearted or open-hearted. When your heart closes, your brain, your creative brain goes to reactive and your gut tenses. But when your heart opens, your brain starts to get incredibly creative and your gut kicks in as your compass. And that's what we're looking for. So we're going to use this system. We're going to also engage your eyes, your ears. You're going to walk on it, so we're engaging the kinesthetic part. You're going to hear yourself saying things. You're going to notice. You're going to make connections. So what you're going to do is, with this issue that you have, what I want you to do is write down each member of the issue or each part of the issue. So if it was, I struggle with relationships, it may be you. It may be mom, it may be dad, because you're looking to see where that might have come from. It may be relationships. So you'd have 4 representatives, one on a separate, each one on a separate piece of paper. So mom on one, dad on one, relationships on one, you on one. And when you've written each one of those down on a separate piece of paper, I want you to put an arrow at the top of that paper. And the reason for that is it then becomes a directional piece of paper. The way that you face it is the way that this representative would be facing in or out. Sandie, does that make sense?
So am I choosing the direction, whether the arrow is pointing upwards and outwards or downwards?
No, you're going to put it at the top, and I'll show you what to do with that in a minute. But if you, as long as you've got that arrow at the top, we are great.
Okay.
So you've got all of your pieces of paper in front of you with an arrow at the top, and thinking about the issue. And now what I want you to do is place them in relationship to one another, either on your desk or on the floor. Now, for many people, they'll work on the desk. I like the floor because it allows me to walk around in it and engage with each piece and see which way it wants to face, and are we far apart? Are we close to each other? What does that look like? Am I looking past you? And that's what you're doing with the arrow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're placing those in relationship to each other. As you set them down, I want you to notice your thoughts and your feelings as you're setting them down. And in a live constellation, when I'm doing an event and working with a client, and we use live representatives, you can actually see quite accurately as well, or quite often, the feeling of the client towards each part of the issue. You notice it. So what I want you to do then is place each of those pieces of paper in relationship to each other on the desk or on the floor, noticing your thoughts and feelings and even your actions. And then I want you to step back and just take a look. For many people, actually seeing their issue in front of them takes it out of the brain into the reality of in front of you. And for the first time, you can actually see it and see what pieces are facing which. How is which piece relating to the other? And sometimes this will bring insights of its own. I've had people place mom, dad, themselves, maybe a sibling, and say to me, oh my goodness, I'm always in the middle of things. Or, good heavens, that's me. I'm always standing on the outside looking in. I do this in my career too. Probably what made me a good consultant. I can see into the system, but I don't want to be in the middle of it. So simply kind of notice this. Have a look at what you're doing, because we are really good translators of what's going on inside. And when we can begin to see it, touch it, taste it, walk on it, it starts to connect dots that we couldn't connect before. When you've done that, take your own place in relationship to the parts of the issue that you're exploring. Go and stand there. So again, maybe you find yourself right on the outside looking in, right in the middle, standing between two parts of it. Let yourself feel that. And one of your best ways to feel that is to just watch your gut and your heart. They're the two ones that will take you into the right position. You go, yeah, this is it. This is the way I feel. Darn it, I'm starting to have those same thoughts again. Good. Don't be annoyed. Pay attention to those thoughts. Your thoughts and your feelings are not there to limit you. They're clues. They're pieces of your puzzle. They're trying very hard to tell you what wants to stop and what wants to start. So pay attention. Notice where in your body that sits, where you can feel the energy and the emotions. And listen carefully to your thoughts and your feelings. So, we have you standing in this beautiful issue that you have set up, noticing your thoughts and feelings, maybe even taking an action. You may be moving closer to it or further away from it. And then, I want to know what happens if you were to start shifting some of those parts around. Does anything change? What happens if instead of you standing right on the outside, you come and stand in the middle? What does that feel like? what happens if instead of being in the middle, you take a step towards the outside? I've had clients who stand in the middle and they're tense and they're tight, and I say, okay, what happens if you take 2 steps back and you go, oh, I can breathe. Notice this for yourself. Then notice the insights that this picture gives you. Oh, in my family, we all struggle with relationships. Oh, none of us are engaged. We're all looking in different directions. Yes, I want to be connected, and how can I be connected if I'm not engaged? I'm looking at myself on the edge of the system. And then ask yourself again, what one new thought could I have right now? And what I want you to do is, if you've got a piece of paper, actually, just write that thought down and play with an arrow on the top, and place that in the system as well, and see what happens for you. Does it cause you to move? Does it cause you to cringe? What happens if you have that one new thought? And if you stand close to that one new thought, does that create one new feeling for you? And with that new feeling, you start to recognize that maybe there is a different movement, a different action, a different possibility. What needs to happen for you here? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When Patrick laid his family system out for the first time, he was startled to find himself at the edge of the family system. He realized that his brother had always needed a lot more attention than he did, and he decided not to be a nuisance and taken himself off to one side. And that was really accurately reflected in the picture in front of him. He then began to realize that he'd also taken himself away from any needed attention. He craved love and attention, but his inner voice kept telling him that his brother needed it more. Which, by the way, then translated to, in his place of work, he thought that everybody else needed the promotion, everybody else needed the help, everybody else needed the resources. And he could begin changing that when he realized that he too needed and deserved the attention. Could be in the middle, that it didn't mean it had to cost anybody anything just because he was getting what also belonged to him. Everybody still with me?
I'm with you.
Perfect. So now that you've done that, we're going to take it one step further. We're going to do a from to. Because a from to tells you very quickly where you are, what needs to happen. So you're going to take a piece of paper. So first of all, let's just stop that. There's going to be a lot for you to process in what you've just done here. So the invitation is to really, yes, come back, listen to it again, write it up, make it your own, turn it into an exercise that you can do again and again for many different issues or possibilities that you want to investigate. So take a nice deep breath in, and then as you exhale, just step back from those pieces of paper that you've had there. You can go back to those in a bit. Typically, this takes a lot longer. I'm taking you through it a little faster than usual. And then we're going to see, so where are you if we look at your want and where you are? So we're going to call that a from and a to. And what I'm going to have you do is write down on one piece of paper that issue that you have. For example, I'm stuck in a relationship. Just write down stuck in relationship, and I want you to put it down at one end of your desk or at one end of the room, facing in. And then on the other piece of paper, I want you to write down again what you really, really want. For example, relationships where my partner is present and I'm engaged. And I want you to put that at the other end of the room, also facing in. So the two are looking at each other.
Okay.
And this is where you begin to hear your heart and your gut, but particularly your gut. Because I'm going to then ask you to go and take your place between the two.
This is interesting.
Now, Sandie, if we were to look at yours, are you closer to the struggle or closer to where you want to be?
I'm closer to the struggle.
Okay, so this is the beauty of this work. When you're closer to the struggle, and sometimes we will notice you may be turned to face the struggle, you may be turned just in the middle of the two, or you may be turned to face the other. If you're turned to face the struggle or you're closer to the struggle, there are two things. One, it may mean that you still have work to do and to clear around the struggle. In other words, doing those thoughts, feelings, and actions and looking at what's not resolved in the family system that's showing up for you that you want to do differently. Or if you're closer to the other one, it may mean that you're beginning to build enough weight to move there. Either way, it doesn't matter. What you want to do is, Sandie, if you're standing closer to that, you want to have a look at what is unresolved for you. And what are your thoughts, feelings, and actions around that piece? And when you can, put that down, the old pattern, with respect, giving it its place, knowing that it's part of your journey. Then what I want you to do is think again about that one new thought, one new feeling, one new action. And along with that, what are the resources I may need? And for the one new thought, one new feeling, you could write those down on a piece of paper and lay it in front of you between you and your desired relationship or desired outcome for this issue. And see if that new thought and new feeling invites you to take the new action of a step forward. If it does, yep, go ahead.
You know, where I'm at right now is I am looking back at this stuck place, but I'm not, it's more with a kind of, okay, I've recognised something here, I see it, and I'm still engaged in processing that recognition.
Beautiful. Beautiful, because you want to do that. Look, I'm taking you through this very quickly. This is a process that can take you, it can take you an hour, it can take you 2 minutes, it can take you a couple of days, it could take you a month. You may need to process that. You may need to think all those thoughts and feelings to be able to acknowledge them and give the place to what's not wanted before you can move to what is wanted. Does that make sense?
It does.
Great. So that's the piece that you're going to do there. What we're doing then to get to your two, in other words, the place that you really want to be, is to say to you, what resources do you need? What one new thought do you need? What one new feeling do you need? And Sandie, it's important that you pay attention to your own language and to what you're telling yourself that galvanizes you forward. Because it's at a point when you suddenly feel yourself moving from I'm stuck to I'm a little bit excited here, or wow, or oh my goodness, something's shifting. Now you know that the old ways, the old thoughts, the old feelings don't have the same pull that they always have. Now you're beginning to feel the attraction point coming from the possibility. It's pulling you forward. Now, something very important for you and for the listeners. You may need to thank the issue before you can move forward. It served you in some way. You may want to ask yourself, for what was this problem first a solution? How did it help me? How did it show up for me? Even if it was just to make you so uncomfortable that you knew you needed to move, it has done its job, and it is precious.
Okay.
Okay. As you start to build enough, now the beauty of this as well is as you start to build up enough weight to get to where you want to be, you are probably going to find that you also have a sense of purpose. And that, again, is a precious thing. I notice that with many people who move quite quickly or move profoundly or come and talk to me and say, my whole life has changed, they invested in a purpose. Something popped for them that said, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find yourself so invested in a purpose, it doesn't matter what's there, it's not going to stop you. And I'll give you a quick for example. Anybody who knows me knows that Disney is one of my favorite places on earth. And I'd always wanted to be in and around Disney. And I went to Disney a couple of years, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I was standing there and I thought, imagine if I could teach here, if I could be here. And I thought, well, then why not? I mean, this is a place that is very transformative. So I went into one of the hotels around. In fact, a couple of them, met with the people, but the prices for having a conference space were outrageous. I mean, they made my knees knock. I looked at that and thought, oh, no. And then I sat down and I thought, but really, what if I could do it? And I took a deep breath and I started marching. And at that point, I really there was no turning back. I was going to make it happen. I just kept thinking, oh dear Lord, just don't let this bankrupt me on the way. But I'm going to make this happen. And at that point, there wasn't a turning back. Sure, I had moments of, I will tell you, sheer panic. Because the idea of being landed with an outsized bill if I didn't do it, because Disney requires deposits, was not a good thought. But I also kept knowing what kept me going was I could build a really great community of people who can do this work for themselves, who can shift themselves in an incredible place. I have to do this. And the minute it became that burning passion and purpose, it pulled me past all of my excuses, all of my limitations, all of the old systemic patterns. Well, in regards to that, not in regards to everything in life, but certainly in regards to what I thought I couldn't do. So purpose is really helpful. If you find yourself with a strong purpose, it is super helpful. It begins to give you your way in the world. And that could be something as simple as and not simple, let me rephrase, but something like, I am the best mom in the world. You know what? My mom couldn't show up. I'm going to be brilliant. It could be, I'm going to be the next guy who takes a spaceship to the moon. When you invest in it and you commit to it and those thoughts begin, you'll notice you now are having new thoughts, new feelings, new actions, because you cannot stand still and move in the direction of your purpose. And then, of course, my final piece would be, ask yourself as you're moving, did someone else in the family reach this place and stop? Did somebody else in the family struggle here and stop? What do I need to do to move beyond it? What is that new thought I need? What is that new feeling? What is that new action? What is the family pattern? How do I set that down with acknowledgement, knowing that it's served, and what is the system now saying to me it's time to do? So if you do that simple from-to piece, you're going to teach yourself to move. You'll notice when you're moving, if you set that down every day or every other day and say, where am I with that issue? You'll very quickly be able to stand on the line between the two and show yourself where you are and teach yourself what the next step is that you need. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. What I've given you is a very basic framework to be able to take your issue, decode it, see it in front of you, and now set yourself on the path of a from-to in a way that is visceral, visual, kinesthetic, and also audio, so you can hear it, see it, touch it. Why is that important? You're consciously laying down a new neural pathway. I spoke to you the other day about we have traumatic neural pathways and triumphant ones. You're teaching yourself to lay down triumphant neural pathways consciously. So now you're not being reactive, you're being creative. This is what people talk about when they say you are a creator in your own world. You absolutely can be. And you can do it beautifully and happily and consciously.
So let me ask you this, Judy. Do you find that when someone heals one pattern in one area of their lives, that it automatically maps over to other patterns? Or does the process need to be done separately on each pattern?
You'll begin to find that they start to overlap. Because and I'll tell you why. The first time you do it, it feels like this huge, big, and it is huge, big, amazing, transformative, incredible, wonderful, marvelous thing. And then you begin to get a little bit, and best of all, you didn't die. So the more you do it, the more you begin to realize that not only will you not die, but you are now becoming that very thing called a living, breathing, conscious, creative being. You are now consciously shaping yourself and thereby your system and your community and the world. You're consciously doing it and you're consciously capable of it. So yes, it absolutely then begins to leap over, or I wouldn't say bleed, I like leap over into all different areas, because now you're a very different being. The minute you have your first different feeling, thought, feeling, action, you're no longer the same being anyway. But now you're becoming that being consciously. And by the way, you're harvesting the wisdom of the ancients to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Judy, as the founder of System Dynamics, you're in great demand with Fortune 500 executives and really high performance individuals, teams, therapists, families. I just want to honour and thank you for your generosity in gifting us with your valuable time, knowledge and expertise over the past 6 months. I mean, that's quite a gift that you've given. I know what the cost of your private sessions is, and I also know the value of them as well. So I do hope that our listeners appreciate that. I'd also like to say that having read an advance copy of your book and had many conversations with you over the last 6 months, all of which have given me, quite a lot of ahas and insights, I must say, I truly believe that this work does stand head and shoulders above anything I've ever studied or practiced. And the bit I love about it that is when we're healing it, we're healing back in time and forward in time too, aren't we?
Absolutely you are. Suddenly, your father, the villain, is no longer the villain, but somebody rather heroic, when you learn to look at it differently. Quite often the villains and the heroes transform. You're giving the past meaning instead of blame. You're loving that your entire system has always been in service of you and in love with and for you. And it's a very, very different way to think. It transforms everything. Now, as for the gift, it's a gift for me, because the more people begin to take this on and do it for themselves, the more we're going to see a happy world, happy people. We're going to become what we should be. And that is plenty gift.
Yeah. Well, we've only got about a minute left. So before we bring this episode and this series to an end, tell me how listeners can continue to benefit from your knowledge and expertise. I know that you've recorded some meditations. Can you tell us quickly about those and when your book is going to be available? And anything else you've got coming up. But we've got to do it in about a minute.
Okay, so very, very quickly, yes, the meditations, they're the first ever constellations meditations, and both of them put you in touch with the line of your mother and the line of your father. They're a way for you to begin creating that flow that you need. and creating the connection that you need. Other ways for them are also to go to my website. There's a lot of information. And then starting next year again, we will be doing a series of live events. And the live events are, people just experience a huge amount with us. Our premiere one will be again at Disney. We haven't decided the subject yet. But they can find me at judywilkins-smith.com. And then, of course, the book, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, debuts June 7th next year, but is available for pre-order via Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There are a number of them, but it is available for pre-order. And, Sandie, I can't wait to begin seeing people from your side of the pond as well. I do already, but seeing large numbers of people change their lives.
Yeah.
And meeting them at events and getting to give you all a hug because we can. I look forward.
Judy, thank you so much for joining us for the past 6 months. I wish you every success. For more information about Judy, her constellations work, meditations, books, courses, visit her website, judywilkins-smith.com. That's it for this week. I'll be back with you next week for another edition of What Is Going On. Until then, it's goodbye from me. And goodbye from Judy too.
Bye.